Alright, I'll try one more, somewhat inspired by you and by our discussions that we've had. It's, it's technically speaking, it's one thing, but psychologically speaking, it's another. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Suppose you had a bunch of spectators here. If you don't have spectators, it doesn't make much sense. And you show them that you can, say, you can cut to four aces. You start like this, do that. Oh my God, look at that. Right there is one ace. You do this again, and you see, ask one of the spectators, say, well, just say stop whenever you feel like it, and they'll say stop, and oh my God, there's another ace. And then you'll say, well, let me do this somewhere in mid-shuffle. If I do this in mid-shuffle, I just break it down for you. Somewhere there in mid-shuffle, there's yet another ace. And then, let's say, and they should probably react at this point, at least to a degree. And you shuffle them some more, and you say, well, I'm just that utterly fantastic, whatever it is that I do. If I cut about here, I should get, well, it's not an ace, it's a 7, but that 7 tells me that 7 cards down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is the last ace. And they tend to react to this, and then I say, well, maybe you think it's something with the aces, but just, I swear to God, there's only these 4 aces in there. When's your birthday? And they'll say September, let's say. So we'll try with 9s instead. I'm going to try and cut at the 9s. Never mind the aces. You could have. I wouldn't have known when your birthday was. Let's get rid of the aces, and you'll set 9s. So they cut to, let's say, 1 9, 1 9 over here, and 1 1 9 over here. And wait, oh no, those are the aces. Very nice. But I didn't mention, you did mention 9, so over here where we had the aces initially, there's now the 9s. And they kind of react to the whole thing. And I say, well, at this point you probably don't trust me that much anymore, because even though I might tell you that they're really truly shuffled and I shuffle them, you might not believe it. They seem shuffled, sure, but you would really only believe that if you were to shuffle. I'll try this with 2 of you. You'd have to trust him, and he'd have to trust you. And this is how conspiracy theories start, by people not trusting each other. So they shuffle this one, and I take them back. You shuffle them any way you wanted to. They take these back, and I set them on the table, blah, 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 blah. And I tell them something about, well, since you shuffled the bottom half and you shuffle the top half, you're going to take off however many cards. You're going to work with the top half this time. It's a mathematical trick. Just count the cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 26 cards. There are 2 jokers in there, so that means there's 28 cards left, whatever. And they make 4 piles, and I tell them, well, just go over, make 4 piles, and one by one by one by one, and at some point, obviously, they're done with that. And so you start at 27, you do the same thing, you make 4 piles here, and they do that. And of course, it's kind of silly, but whatever, I'll go through it. And then I say, well, if I turn over to piles 1 and 3, and 3 and 4, and 5 and 7, and 6 and 8, you'll get the aces and the 9s again. This is just a mathematical trick, and I immediately go on and do something else. Now, how should I explain this? This is not all that interesting from a technical point of view. It is interesting from a psychological point of view, because to me, magic only happens in the mind of a spectator. And obviously, I just did this for you way too quickly, obviously, because, well, you're not a layperson. You see what's going on and what have you. But from a layperson's perspective, as far as I'm concerned, I like to imagine that I kind of have an idea of what they are thinking. I would like to know what they're thinking, and I'd like to make them think whatever it is that I want them to think. So an intelligent spectator obviously thinks that you're using sleight of hand, which is true. You are using sleight of hand. So rather than saying, I'm not using sleight of hand, well, you say, well, this is sleight of hand, and the first ace cutting, then knocking out the ace of spade, well, that is sleight of hand. So they kind of get what they expect. And they say something about, their birthday being nines, and you kind of surprise them by cutting to the aces again and switching out the nines. Okay, fair enough. But it's still sleight of hand. And then I tend to say, well, at this point, you really don't trust me anymore. And it's true, they really don't trust you anymore. Not in like a bad way, but they don't trust you the second you do anything with those cards. They don't trust you anymore. And you acknowledge that. And I like to acknowledge what I kind of think that I know that they're thinking anyway. So the idea for me is to break down their mental resistance, if you will. And so you do all that. And I like this particular shuffle here because so you have the aces on top and the nines at the bottom, or vice versa. Once you do that sort of shuffle, that gives them a moment to breathe. So they just saw something that was very unusual, what have you. It gives them a moment to breathe. And then I like to talk about conspiracy theories, because it is true as far as conspiracy theories go. The reason why they're kind of nutty is because, well, we'd have to have this fundamental distrust. Why did we not? People believe that we did not land on the moon. Some folks don't believe that we didn't land on the moon. For that to be true, there would have to be 400,000 people lying about this for the last 45 years or so. So you can't go through life with that degree of distrust. Now, if you and you mentioned this, and it has nothing to do with the trick per se, but it is true, so I don't have to lie. Because if I was to lie, if you lie and you say something that you know to be untrue, chances are you're going to give it away somehow. You're going to give it away because you feel uncomfortable. But if you say something that you think is true anyway, the acting is perfect, because you don't have to act like you're not lying. You're actually telling the truth. And then I hand out those two cards, those two packets, and obviously I have to have 4 cards palmed in my left hand and 4 cards palmed in my right hand. And you need to be, I'm sure you can do that, but for me, I'm not the greatest at palming cards, and I'm not the greatest at palming cards in both hands. So you need to have something to talk about. You need to have something, you shuffle these, and you have to trust him, and you have to trust him, and so on and so forth. And once they give you back the cards, once the first person gives you back the cards, well, then you can stretch out the hand. You can just hold out the hands quite open and quite flat. The second person gives you back the cards, puts it on top. And that's the only part of the technical part that I like, is because you just set them down, and in that moment that you set them down, it takes about, 0.75 seconds, less than a second. In that split second, you set them down and you cap the deck, and then again you start talking. You talk some more, and at this point they forget that you've ever handled the cards in the first place. They think, well, he shuffled, I shuffled, whatever, and then they go through the whole counting bit. And you say, well, it's just a mathematical trick of some sort. You trust him, and he trusts you, and what have you. It's just mathematics. And then in the end, of course, they have the 4 nines and the 4 aces, which is nice. And you say, well, but anyway, I don't do that kind of thing. And then you move on. And then you have them, I think, experience bears this out, then mentally you've broken down a lot of their resistance. There comes a point where you can essentially tell them whatever you want to tell them, and they believe you anyway, which makes that whole magic bit more memorable in my view. So that's it's something that just gets me to where I want them to get, where I say, this is utterly impossible. It's just an idea. I have done it. It's nice, and it's also something. Well, if you enter this whole palming bit, and you have to palm the cards, because if you don't palm the cards and you just fall shuffle yourself or whatever, it's not much of an effect. But if they're convinced that the cards are utterly shuffled, and you go through this whole mathematical procedure, which isn't much of a procedure, if the cards have the top and bottom, then it's a miracle as long as they believe that they're shuffled, but they must be able to shuffle them. And if they can't shuffle them, it's not worth performing. Anyway, it's it's an idea. It's a nice effect, and it gets a very strong reaction. All right, thank you.